Welcome. Last week we discussed our 2020 theme, Christ Makes Free. For our next two sessions, we'll be looking further at the sermon theme for January, which is Fellowship with Jesus Christ. What is fellowship? We use the term for so many things, most often when we talk about eating together. Even the room in our church where we eat together usually bears the name Fellowship Hall. Eating together is not a bad thing. It builds relationships and gives us opportunities to share and spend time together. However, true Christian fellowship is found with Jesus Christ, particularly in communion with Him. In the book of 1 Corinthians, Paul is addressing this very issue, fellowship in regards to eating and fellowship with Christ in communion. It seems that over time, the lines began to blur between these two. Let's take a look. We can read this rather strong reprimand in the 11th chapter of 1 Corinthians. Now, in giving these instructions, I do not praise you, since you come together not for the better, but for the worse. First of all, when you come together as a church, I hear that there are divisions among you, and in part I believe it. For there must also be factions among you, that those who are approved may be recognized among you. Therefore, when you come together in one place, it is not to eat the Lord's Supper. For in eating, each one takes his own supper ahead of the others, and one is hungry and another is drunk. What? Do you not have houses to eat and drink in? Or do you despise the church of God and shame those who have nothing? What shall I say to you? Shall I praise you in this? I do not praise you. Wow, it seems that Paul was rather unhappy with them. Let's explore some historical context to see what is happening here. In the early church, Christians often celebrated communion in the context of a meal. Large meals were also a place where social status and divisions were made very evident. Those of a higher class came to the meal earlier and were served lavishly in the dining room, while those that counted less would arrive later and would be given the leftovers in the atrium or overflow room. Since the poor would only receive what's left, they were still hungry, and it is possible that they may have started to eat the bread meant for communion to satisfy their hunger. It seemed the congregation was not mindful of the value of Lord's Supper, or cared about the discord and divisions among them. With these actions, the unity of the congregation was broken, and the purpose and meaning of the Lord's Supper was forgotten. Let's continue to read the explanation of the Lord's Supper as Paul presents it to the Corinthians. That the Lord Jesus, on the same night in which he was betrayed, took bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it, and said, "Take, eat. This is my body which is broken for you. Do this in remembrance of me." In the same manner he also took the cup after supper, saying, "This cup is the new covenant in my blood. This do, as often as you drink it, in remembrance of me. For as often as you eat this bread and drink this cup, you proclaim the Lord's death till he comes." Jesus established Holy Communion in the midst of the Passover meal, from which it draws some similarities that we can learn from. The Passover meal was a celebration where you received each other and shared food and drink equally and freely. This division of have and have-nots goes against the very nature of the meal where everyone ate the same things at the same time. Divisions in the congregation also violate the fundamental meaning of celebrating Holy Communion, in that Christ's sacrificial death was and is for all. Another purpose of the Passover was to bring participants into a personal experience of the first Passover, as if they themselves were coming forth out of Egypt. With the words, "Do this in remembrance of me," Jesus calls each of us to personally go back to the night of the Last Supper. The sacrament becomes a living actualization of the past in light of the future return of Christ. One of the blessings said during the celebration of Passover is, "Let all who are hungry enter and eat. Let all who are needy come to our Passover feast." In Holy Communion, Jesus invites us to his feast, his body and blood given for us. This goes beyond just thinking about a past event. Rather, it is an invitation to participate in the event remembered. This perception is so beautifully captured in the old spiritual that asks, "Were you there when they crucified my Lord?" These words implore us to relive the events at the end of Jesus' life. In the celebration of Holy Communion, the Last Supper and Jesus' betrayal, torture, and death on the cross become real for us. A further juxtaposition is made with the words, "For as often as you eat this bread and drink this cup, you proclaim the Lord's death till he comes." While we are present in the event of the past, proclaiming the Lord's death, we also at the same time look to the future till he comes. In this one sentence, remembrance and hope come together, not in a wishful sense, but rather hope as the confident expectation of the fulfillment of God's promises. Next week, we'll finish looking at Paul's response to the Corinthians and discuss some clarifications to understanding fellowship.